Let me share with you something that I read not long ago. A man named Joel Kotkin wrote a book called Tribes. And it's called, subtitled, How Race, Religion, and Identity Determine Success in the New Global Economy. Now, if you don't know what's happening in the global economy, then what's happening in San Francisco and Oakland and Berkeley will not matter. Because the world is changing under your feet, and it will affect San Francisco, Oakland, and Berkeley. And if you don't understand it, you can't predict what's going to happen, and you're going to be overwhelmed by one great wave. So you ought to listen to Kotkin, because he's made a study of ethnic groups that are successful in the world. And he concludes that there are 5 groups in the world economy, and Africans are not one of them, that run the world. 5 ethnic groups that run the world. And these ethnic groups, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I want to read the essence of what he said, are something he calls global tribes. Use the word tribe. Ethnic group is the same thing. And he gives you the names of these groups, and if I gave you the names, you'd know who they were. He says, although each of these 5 tribes possesses a vastly different history, they all share the following 3 critical characteristics. Number 1, all of the ruling tribes in the world, these ethnic groups that are running the world now, have a strong ethnic identity and a sense of mutual dependence that helps the group adjust to changes in the global economic and political order without losing its essential unity. That's the first part. Now, the flip side of that is a group that's not doing good would be what? Have a weak sense of ethnic identity, no sense of mutual dependence, unable to adjust in the global economic and political order because they have no unity. Now, you need to read this book, because when you hear black folks say that, some people think that we don't know what we're talking about. But here's a man made a whole study of this in the world. That's number 1. That's what makes these groups successful. Number 2, they have a global network based on mutual trust that allows the tribe to function collectively beyond the confines of national or regional borders. So these tribes are not nations. Let me make that clear. They're not nations, they're ethnic groups. But they're ethnic groups whose reach exceeds national boundaries. In other words, their reach is worldwide. For example, one of the groups is Indians. The Indians from India. And the Indians from India have a part of the world's economy that belongs to them, according to Joel Kotkin. And it doesn't matter where they are in the world, what they know is that they're Indians, and that they depend upon each other. And as a consequence of the unity, they function in a very powerful way. Another one is British. British. That means it's a group of people, I didn't say England, I didn't say Germany, I didn't say American, I said British. That means there's a British ethnic group, according to Kotkin. And they have the unity because of the culture, because of the, if you will, memory. They remember things that give identity. You have no identity without memory. The third thing that Kotkin talks about in his book is that these groups that are successful have a passion for technical or other knowledge from all possible sources, combined with an essential open-mindedness that fosters rapid cultural and scientific development critical for success in the late 20th century world economy. So the passion for the technical, let me review the bidding: strong ethnic identity, a global network based on that identity. Because of the identity, they trust each other, and they all go to work and do their homework on building their capacity in technology. Those are the three things that make strong ruling groups. Now, what he says also in this book is there are some other ethnic groups that are getting ready to move into the world stage. For example, Koreans are just about to take their place on the world stage. Then he talks about some that are not going to make it. Guess who's not going to make it? Now, he recognizes that the Africans have had 2 or 3 weak starts. In fact, he's very specific in analyzing African Americans in this book. He goes back to the Garvey movement. He goes back to the 60s, to the US movement, to the civil rights movement. He knows some of us better than we know ourselves because many of us don't have memory. But he has a memory. He even gives credit to the Africans for waking up other groups so that they got their memory together again and built the identity that made it possible for them to trust each other so they could function collectively, so that collectively they could build networks and they could prepare themselves in technology so that they could participate and have a share in the world community. Now, either you're in one of these groups or you're out. If you're out, then just take your chances, one at a time. But if you're in, there are certain benefits that accrue. So what I'm saying is this: it seems as if there are some people who know some things that we don't know, and they have known these things for a long time. They've known these things because what they have known about the functioning of ethnic identity allowed them to destroy us as a people. The target in slavery, colonization, and segregation was not merely to steal African land and to steal African labor. The target was to steal African minds. It was to take a magnet, if possible, and to erase the software off the hardware. It was to deprogram the computer of the African and to reprogram the African so that the African would not be African, because somebody knew that those who had a strong cultural identity would feel identified with, bonded to, connected to, trustful of brothers and sisters. And then they could take their place on the world stage as competitors. And as a result of the fact that they did those things, we wind up in a mess in 1994. And the mess that we're in 1994 is very interesting. We are not respected in 1994. I'm talking about as a group. Nobody respects Africans as a group. You respect Japanese as a group. That's one of the tribes that they mention in the book. And they have to be respected. They've earned the world's respect. But who respects Africans? I mean, we're so disrespected that the very peak leadership of the African community is disrespected. You can fire a surgeon general with the stroke of a pen. Destroy the Black Caucus with the stroke of a pen. That's your peak political leadership. It doesn't get any higher than that. Here today, gone tomorrow. Nobody respects you. Face your leadership. I mean, when people want to make hay, they Willie Hortonize folk. When people want to make political hay, set up a debate or set up a situation where you can insult Jesse Jackson. Set up a situation where you can insult Sister Soldier so that you can make points with the constituency that you're trying to make. Set up a situation so that Lonnie Guinier has to go, even though she's the best qualified person for the Office of Civil Rights. Set up a debate so that the Secretary of Agriculture has got to go. You see, and all we're talking about now is the mile folk. You understand how little respected we are? Because no one has to please us. That's the mess we're in. There's no plan for our masses right now. Oh, I know that individuals can make it all the way to the Supreme Court. But what about the masses of our people? Look at how long we've been here. We're not a new immigrant group. How long are we supposed to stay on the bottom? Who has a plan to see to it that 20 years from now we're not in the same position that we're in right now? What's in motion that will change that for the masses? Not only is there nothing in motion that will change it in a positive direction, but there are some things that are being put in motion that will change it in a negative direction. This is what Jake Carruthers calls the mess that we're in. We're in the mess that we're in because the minimal help that we have is being dismantled. Those things that we fought for in the 50s and 60s, most of us didn't fight for enough because all we fought for were jobs. And jobs are disappearing. Not only are our jobs disappearing, if you understand the world, everybody's job is disappearing. You don't really see it yet. When we finish with NAFTA, when we finish with GATT, that what we have to do is act and be Sankofa. That we have a job to do. That the job that we have to do is to go back and get what we left behind. We have to assume certain kinds of responsibilities. We have to build community capacity, not individual capacity. If you listen to all the rhetoric, they underline individual every time they talk about us. They don't want to see ethnic group. That's ethnic cleansing. We have to know who we are. We can't be confused about that. We have to know who we were. We have to know how we got into this mess. We have to create strategies to get out of this mess. We have to work together with other people to get out of this mess. We have to do some homework in order to restore our memory of history and to restore the memory of education, how we used to do it, and to build structures for socialization and economic development. There was a brother in ASCAC in Detroit, Michigan, who had this little story that I will end on what it is, how we have to work together to get this job done. His name is Don McNeely, and he has a little story that he calls What We Learned from Geese. Because some people say that you are dumb as a goose. But if you stop to think about it for a moment, he said, well, if we look at it from an African worldview, one of our distinguishing characteristics as to who we are is our guiding belief that we are one with nature. So the question is, how is this reached operationally? How are we going to go back and fetch it, in other words? How are we going to do Sankofa? So the next time somebody says you have the sense of a goose, you should take it as a compliment. So this is the story about geese, and it's fascinating what we can learn from them. Fact 1. As each bird flaps its wings, it creates an uplift for the bird that's following. So by following in a V formation, the whole flock adds 71% greater flying range than if one bird flew by himself. That's a fact. Lesson: people who share a common direction and a sense of community can get where they're going quicker and easier because they're traveling on the strength of one another. Fact number 2. Whenever a goose falls out of formation, it suddenly feels the drag and resistance of trying to fly alone and quickly gets back into formation to take advantage of the lifting power of the bird immediately in front of him. Lesson 2. If we have as much sense as geese, we will stay in formation with those who are ahead of where we want to go and be willing to accept their help as well as to give ours to them. Fact number 3. When the lead goose gets tired, it rotates back into the formation and another goose flies at the point position. Lesson 3. It pays to take turns doing the hard task and sharing the leadership. Fact 4. The geese in formation honk from behind to encourage those up front to keep up their speed. Lesson 4. We need to make sure that our honking from behind is encouraging and not something else. Lesson number 5, fact 5. When a goose gets sick or wounded or shot down, 2 geese drop out of formation and follow it and help and protect it, and they stay with it until it's able to fly again or until it dies. And only then do they launch out on their own with another formation or catch up with the flock that they left. Lesson number 5. If we have as much sense as geese, we will stand by each other in difficult times as well as when we are strong. The power of what we can get done when we rely on the thrust of one another is a quantum leap. Have you considered involving others in your major projects and decisions? Is your community really a community? If not, Sankofa. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, great. You got my files back.